Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to look at the ALTERS on ARC GPU from the A310 to the B580. Welcome to Response PC, I'm Dunk, let's game on. Starting off with the bottom, the A310, this is a 4GB VRAM card. Even though the dev said that the minimum requirement should be the A750 with 8GB of VRAM, we are still able to play with the A310 somehow. I get the GPU running at 99% of its decision with 5.4GB of VRAM out of 4. So we go fetch some of the RAM of the system, which is slower than the VRAM, to be able to compensate. I'm currently playing at the 1080p, lowest settings obviously, with XeSS ultra quality that you can see on the screen, but whichever XeSS you choose, balance, performance, you have a hard time to be at your 30 FPS to be deemed playable. Next up we have the A380. This is the 6GB VRAM card of Intel. That should be as the minimum requirement, and we can actually see it is. We are currently playing at medium settings with XeSS AA or native, and we get an average of 32 FPS. If you want a bit more FPS, you can drop XeSS to ultra quality or quality, but it is playable. The GPU is pegged at 99% using 5.6GB of VRAM, CPU barely doing anything, and we're using 14.3GB of RAM. We have a little drop in FPS when we do mining operation, probably some other operation when you go further in game. I'm not really far yet in this game, and you will dip in the high 20s. 27, 28 FPS, so you can definitely drop from medium to low to be stable over 30 FPS. Your call, your game. Next up we have the A580, the first 8GB variant in this listing that can play the game quite well. We are at the ultra settings at 1080p, XeSS AA, and we get an average of 48 FPS, dropping in the low 40s in mining operation and in the high 60s, wandering around in open world. I'm not including footage from inside the base because we are always in the high 80s, 90s, depending on the GPU and settings, but the FPS is up in the air when you are in the base. The GPU is pegged at 99% using 6GB of VRAM out of 8. CPU we are in the 30s using 12.4GB of RAM with a quite a stable and smooth frame time. Next up we have the A750, a 8GB GPU VRAM card at 1080p high settings. I drop from ultra. I want to see if I can reach a 60 FPS to play this game with XeSS AA or native. We get an average of 55 FPS, not quite exactly the 60 I was looking for, but we get it time to time here and there. In mining operation we drop in the low 50s. In open world we're in the 63, 64 FPS, and in base we are at 90 FPS. The GPU is pegged at 99% using 6.8GB of VRAM out of 8. CPU wise we are in the high teens, and for the memory we are at 13 to 14GB of RAM. Frame time graph is smooth enough, actually really smooth. You can drop the settings to medium if you want to be 60 FPS all the time, most of the time. Next up is the last 8GB VRAM card that I have, the A770 8GB variant. At 1080p high settings again, I want to reach 60 FPS and XeSS AA or XeSS native, having the GPU pegged at 99% using 6.5GB of VRAM out of 8, CPU in the high teens again, and 13GB of RAM again. Frame time is super smooth and we get an average of 60 FPS, exactly where we're looking for. In mining operation we drop in the mid 50s, and running around in open world we are in the high 60s and reaching almost 100 in the base. And this is actually the card that is listed as the recommended system requirement. At least they write A770 8GB video memory, but they don't list if it's at the 1080p 60 FPS or 1440p 30 FPS. At least at 1080p we're reaching 60 FPS at high settings. Upgrading the VRAM, meaning we now at the A770LE, 16GB of VRAM. We also upgrade the resolution to 1440p with the goal to still reach 60 FPS, but I had to drop the settings from high to medium to be able to reach over 60 FPS. We're now at a 62 FPS with the GPU pegging at 99% but using 6.8, 6.9GB of VRAM. That means the A770 8GB, the A580 and the A750 8GB can also probably play at 1440p at medium settings and reach a similar FPS, as we're not reaching over 8GB of VRAM. At least in my testing I didn't reach over 7GB of VRAM at any point. Changing generation, now we have the Battle Mage B570 at 10GB of VRAM. We're still at 1440p, medium settings, and XeSS AA. I got an average of 73, which is really nice. You can probably crank up to high settings, but when I reach a mining operation happen anywhere, the FPS drop in the high 50s. So if you want to a constant FPS over 60, drop to medium or keep high and play with some settings to medium. Again, the GPU peg at 99% and using 5.9 GB of VRAM out of 10. Frame time, frame graph, everything run smoothly. And finally, the B580, 12 GB VRAM, not like we're going to use it anyway, at 1440p, now at high settings instead of medium with XeSS AA. We get an average of 68 FPS, dropping at 58 in the mining area, at 73 in open world and 110 in the base. GPU peg at 99% and using 6.7 GB of VRAM out of 12. So we never reach over 8 GB VRAM regardless of the GPU we use. Frame time, frame graph is again super smooth. I can't wait to see what the next B series is going to bring us in terms of performance. So that was it for the ARC GPU in the ALTERS. We find out that the real minimum requirement for the ARC GPU is the A380, not the A570 something that I don't know where this come from. Probably a mobile GPU that I don't know about. And that is to play at 1080p to reach 30 FPS or more. If you look at the recommended settings, they said the A770 8GB variant, and I can say they pretty nail it. The A770 8GB variant at 1080p high settings with XeSS AA, we get an average exactly of 60 FPS. And that's all I had to say for the ARC GPU in ALTERS. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one, and subscribe.